Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's event from the Jesus College Intellectual Forum. My name's Julian Huppert, and I'm the director of this centre here at Jesus College, and you can see Jesus College behind me on a nice sunny day. Just to let you know, we are recording this event for those who can't join us. Jesus College is an ancient institution and has weathered many changes. It was a 12th century nunnery at first, and a college since 1496. So we've seen civil and world wars, pandemics of the past, huge technology change. The Intellectual Forum is much more recent. We were set up about 5 years ago to get people to think and talk about important issues and to reach outside the boundaries of our own college. We've had over those years many stellar speakers: fashion designer Jimmy Choo, the former New Zealand Prime Minister Helen Clark, Director of NASA's Deep Space X-ray Observatory Belinda Wilkes, and earlier this year, the Assistant Director General of the World Health Organization, Peter Simpson, talking about vaccine equity around the world. We've also shown some of the amazing work that's being done by our own academics, everything from using synthetic biology to come up with a new safe, clean way to dye clothes, to experiments with the coldest things in the universe, even colder than outer space. And if you want a real treat, do have a look at the Jesus College YouTube channel, where many of these are captured and where this event will also be after we've finished. And today I'm really delighted to welcome Sam Pitroda to speak with us. Sam, as you'll hear, is a true global pioneer, and it's great to have him with us to discuss his life, his work, and his vision for the future. So we're going to start off with me interviewing Sam. We'll have a bit of a discussion, and then there'll be a chance for you to ask your own questions. And please do use the Q&A function on Zoom to ask those questions. You can also tweet along using the hashtag #IntelForum and @IntelForum. But before we start off with Sam, I'd like to invite someone else to speak. Because one of the joys of working at a place like Jesus College is the brilliance of the other people who come and work here. We've run a few events with Soumya Saxena, who's a talented young Indian academic, currently a British Academy postdoctoral fellow and a Jesus College postdoctoral associate. Soumya, it's great to have you with us. Can I hand over to you to introduce today's guest?
Thank you so much, Julian. And this is a real pleasure sort of being on Intellectual Forum and sort of being able to host events like this, which are so intellectually stimulating and entertaining. I'm actually delighted to welcome today's guest and welcome Mr. Sam Pitroda. And we are, among a lot of other things, going to also be discussing his brilliant new book, which is called Redesign the World, a Global Call to Action, which is a book I highly recommend to everyone attending today. I've been told to keep the introductions brief, but I must say a little something about Mr. Pitroda. For those of us who grew up in India, Sam Pitroda was a household name, so it's almost every single day that we came across his name in the newspapers, and it was almost always associated with ideas of progress, ideas of revolution, of IT, of telecom. So, literally all things progressive kind of, came with this face of Mr. Sam Pitroda. And he is someone who has advised the Indian government in various capacities, but also two of the finest Indian prime ministers, Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi and Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. Among other things, he has won multiple awards. I'll be brief with this because he's won so many. I'll just name a couple. He's won the Lal Bahadur Shastri Award for Outstanding Achievement in Telecom. He's also won the Lifetime Achievement Award by Data Quest and the Padma Bhushan, which is one of the highest civilian honors in the country, for science and engineering. He has, rightly been called the father of Indian telecom institution because he continues to chair multiple philanthropic initiatives, multiple charities, and it is in that capacity that we're hoping to have this conversation with him today. He's going to be speaking about, among other things, the very significant, issue of, global importance, which is about state accountability, in a time when there's big data and big technology. And in this, he'll be in conversation with Dr. Julian Huppert. Now, most of us from Jesus, of course, know who Dr. Julian Huppert is, but I'm still going to give him a little bit of an introduction. He's been the founding director of the Intellectual Forum, which is actually giving us the opportunity to host this event. He's also been a former member of Parliament and represented Cambridge in Parliament from 2010 to 2015. And he's had an academic career as a scientist, but he's also chaired multiple panels and initiatives, including the independent reviewers of DeepMind Health. He advises the UK government on ethical issues around biometrics, forensics, algorithms, big data, as well as a range of technological companies. He's the deputy chair of an NHS funding body for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And I can say this, from my personal interactions with him, that he's one of the few academics who really encourage all of us to share sort of academic research with issues that are relevant to policy. And that translation, which very often does not take place, is something I really credit Julian with. He's encouraged all of us to find policy relevance for a lot of our research. And with that, I'm not going to take up any more time. I want the two panelists to now be in conversation. So Sam and Julian, over to you. I'll just turn off my video and hand over to you, Julian.
Well, thank you very much, Sam, and for saying so much. So Sam, we've heard a bit about many of your achievements, but there's a whole lot more to do. And we'll pick up on some of those as we go. Could we just start off with where you come from? Could we talk about your family and your education? How did you start off on this amazing trajectory?
Thank you, Julian. First of all, thank you for the opportunity given to me. I want to thank Jesus College at Cambridge. I want to thank you and Soumya for this special opportunity. And I hope we have some good conversation. I was equally impressed with your background. I'm delighted that I got a chance to interact with you. And I hope this is not the first one. I hope we have more interactions. And I would like to remain in touch with you. I think you're an important man there. And let's remain connected. Okay. So with this, thank you for the first question. I was born and raised in a small little tribal village in Orissa, in British Raj. I was born in 1942. My father had fourth grade education. We come from Gujarat, the state of Mahatma Gandhi, speak the same language. But my father came looking for work in Orissa because Orissa had green forests and a lot of minerals and wealth. We were 8 in the family, 3 brothers and 5 sisters. I was number 3. And when India became independent in 1947, my father felt empowered. During independence movement, he was following Gandhi all the time, like anybody else would. And in our house, we had 5 big pictures of Indian leaders: Mahatma Gandhi, Pandit Nehru, Sardar Patel, Maulana Azad, and Subhash Chandra Bose. As a little kid growing up, we looked up to these pictures as our role model. I remember the day when Mahatma Gandhi died. I was about 5, 6 years old. My father came in and said, Bapuji just got shot. My mother, took everybody and gave us a bath as if somebody in the family had died. So I was brought up in a very Gandhian environment. Since there were no schools in this village, my parents decided to send us to Gujarat in a small boarding school, Gandhian boarding school, to study. I was 9 years old and my older brother was 12. They sent us 1,000 miles away, which I believe was the key to my success. My mother had the courage to let go of 2 little children just so that they could study. We went to a boarding school where you had to do everything. You learn discipline, you learn moral ethics, you learn to do your own things, you wash your own dishes, you wash your own clothes, you made your own beds. And we had Gandhian teachers who taught us the value of love, truth, trust. Boarding school had variety of people, so we learned to live in diversity. They were rich, they were poor, they were long, they were top, short, they were, people from all walks of life. And a lot of that learning became a foundation rooted in Gandhian thought of simplicity, sacrifice. And we didn't realize what it would mean later on in life. We were learning these things because that was the only thing to learn about. So we'll go see our parents once a year during summer holidays, sometimes during Diwali holidays. And we were completely isolated. Our parents trusted us, and we were so concerned that we will not break their trust. So we were disciplined students, did the right things, never goofed off, never did anything that was, thought in our mind as something improper, because poor parents had put too much trust. And they never asked us what we studied because they didn't know. In fact, my father, when he came to America later on, one day asked me, he said, "Son, what did you really study?" So I said, "Dad, I studied physics." And his next question was, "What is physics?" And I knew that my strength was his love, his trust. So I studied in boarding school for 5 years. Then we thought we were now grown up. At the age of 13, we decided to move to a bigger city called Baroda. Rented an apartment, and two brothers stayed in an apartment. I went to engineering school where you learn to do things with your hand, carpentry, blacksmith, mechanical and all that. I liked to do things with my hands. Studied in school there for 2 years and then went to college. I liked physics. So I got my BS in physics, master's in physics. And one fine morning during my master's, I read in the newspaper that President Kennedy has decided to take man onto the moon. I was young, energetic, stupid, and I decided I'm going to go to America. Had no idea, had no money, didn't even know anything about America, because in those days, radio was just coming. There was no TV. I had never used telephone in my life because I was too poor to have telephone. And somebody who had a telephone, he was still too rich to be my friend. So I borrowed some money, and my older brother helped me, giving me the moral support. And I decided to come to America, took a boat from Mumbai to Karachi, Karachi to Aden, Aden to Egypt, Egypt to Naples, Naples to Genova, took a train from Genova to London, took a plane from London to New York, and took a bus from New York to Chicago. Landed up here in New World, had no idea of what all this meant. And I realized that ignorance is a great asset. I had no idea of what hamburger looks like, what hot dog looks like, what is steak. I was fascinated with doorknob because I'd never seen a doorknob, because I had seen only latches. So I realized that this is an adventure, that I'm here to experience great adventure of my life. Everything is new. 8-lane highways. Everything is new. you couldn't imagine things. So you go to a cafeteria, you don't know what this food is. You said, I want some green one, I want some brown one. That's all you could do. When I saw tea bag, I was puzzled. The tea comes in a bag that you dip it. So I said, why not sugar? So everything to me was innovation. And I saw through these eyes of a Indian boy from a village who saw this new world and immense possibilities to do things. So I went to get a PhD in physics. My professor said it will take 7 years, 5 years. I had a girlfriend in India. And I said, hey, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to get married. So my professor said, go get a degree in electrical engineering. It'll take you 1 year. I got a master's in electrical engineering, then worked for part-time PhD and called my girlfriend and got married. And that was about 57 years ago.
Wow.
Okay. She came here, we got married, started life, built a business in America, sold it to Rockwell International for $50 million cash in 1979, 1980, became head of Rockwell International, and then went to India and could not make a phone call to my wife. Again, a lot of arrogance and some amount of ignorance. Said, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to fix India's telephone. So if I had known everything I knew then, I wouldn't have done it.
So I mean, there's just so many things you've just covered. I'd like to come back to that huge story of fixing the Indian telecom system. I think my first time in India was 20 something years ago, and I wouldn't say it was completely fixed then. But can I just go back to a few things? I mean, firstly, just we've had a few questions come in. One was just, which year did you actually arrive in the US? Can you remind us?
64.
64.
End of 64.
And I mean, just it's amazing to have that story where the purity of the education and your family commitment to learning, the idea that your parents, they didn't understand what you were doing, but wanted you to do it is really quite powerful and speaks a lot to the ability of education to free people up. But also that sense that I guess you would never, you were used to the idea that things could just be different, that things could change, that you could compare a completely new place. Not everyone would have the confidence to go and just order the green or the brown and take what comes. I mean, you're unusual in that way.
Like I said, ignorance is a great asset. I knew that I don't know many things. And this was an opportunity to learn. Every human being I interacted with was a lesson for me. Every visual was a lesson for me. I saw the mailbox in US and I said, my God, what a great design of a mailbox compared to Indian design. I almost had to open the doorknob with a screwdriver to see how this thing works. You do this and it goes in, you do this and it comes out. I thought that was fascinating.
So it's fascinating, and you've done so much to explore those ideas and that potential. So, because one of the things, I mean, you sort of skipped past, you set up a company and told it, but can we just jump back to what that was doing? Because now it seems completely normal to have these amazing, almost omnipotent, omniscient electronic devices with us. But you created pretty much the first one at all. The electronic diary was 1975. How did people react to the idea of that? I mean, could you have imagined how things would develop from there?
You see, I was lucky to be at the right place at the right time by accident. I worked with vacuum tubes. Transistor was born 5 years after I was born. I was at Intel when Intel designed 4-bit microprocessor. I knew the founders of Intel. in those days. I used their first semiconductor memory. I bought 16-bit RAM for $16 a bit. I bought 2-input NAND gate for $32. So I have been through that just by accident. You know, it's a funny story. I was working for Nuclear Instruments, and my company decided to move to Cleveland. I went to Cleveland. I didn't like Cleveland, and I wanted to come back to Chicago because I had all the friends in Chicago. So I applied for a job in telecom company, and there was a British person who had taken a job on digital switching. And he was going to move from London to Chicago. But then in between, his wife got pregnant, and she did not want to deliver child in America. So he wrote to the company saying, I'm not going to join. And I got that job. So by luck, my first job in telecom was in digital communication in 1966, when people didn't even know what digital communication is all about. Okay. So that gave me a chance to innovate, because those were the early days of digital communication. Whatever you did was an invention, because you were at the bleeding edge of the technology. So when I saw work of 4-bit microprocessor, I said, how do I convert my black diary into electronics? So I decided to design electronic diary, which is right here. Okay, filed a patent, got a patent, but I didn't have money to build a business because it was a consumer business, will require a lot of money. And then in between, I decided to go to India. You know, I realized that I had a choice to make in my life. Either I can make a lot of money in the business and become a billionaire, or I can go to India and make a dent in connecting India. I made a choice based on my Gandhian thinking that it is better to be in public service. You can always make money. I proved that by the time I was 38, I was a, sort of multimillionaire, and I said, big deal. When required, you can make money, but you will not get a chance to make a contribution to connect India.
So I would like to discuss, just, I mean, when you showed us that electronic diary, that was an original from 1975, and this was
this was, so 75 was the patent.
Okay.
And I went back to India, and I realized that this will take some time. So when I came back to America in 1990s again, I saw everybody using diary. I said, hey, that's my patent. So I sued. I wrote first to Casio, Sharp, Radio Shack, Hewlett Packard, and Texas Instrument. They were all making diary. So I said, hey, this is my patent. And they didn't pay much attention because I was just an individual. I was not IBM. So I sued all of them in Cook County Court in Chicago. And finally, they agreed. And they said, I think there's something wrong with my phone. Keeps ringing. Finally, hold on, let me just, so finally they agreed, and we settled out of the court, and I got a lot of money from the court settlement. Then I started a business in America again, but there's a whole story, went back to India, worked there and came back. And then I designed the first mobile wallet in 1994.
Wow.
And filed a patent. Filed a patent. Okay. Got a patent, set up a company this time, and then finally sold that company to MasterCard in 2013.
I mean, it's just an amazing story. I mean, you know, the legal side is fascinating as well, but again, to have the vision back in 75, you know, when I think you said it was a 4-bit processor. I have no idea how many bits are in you know, your slightly malfunctioning phone or mine, you know, but it's just been spectacularly different. And to have the vision that said that
unbelievable.
4 bits was probably not enough to do very much with, but to see that it
is more like a supercomputer of my generation. Okay.
So, I mean, I should, of course, say I'm currently in Cambridge, where Cambridge is home to ARM, and I think you've met Herman Hauser. And ARM and the chips there, I think the figures are that there are more ARM chips shipped each year than there are human arms in the world. And they've been a big part of the story that's taken your ideas to reality.
Big.
So in their case, it was partly because they didn't have enough money to do something more complicated, but that's a tale for another event. So, because you've touched on the importance of service to India, that Gandhian approach, and so you went back, because you were saying earlier before I cut you off that you went back, couldn't ring your wife. Your wife has clearly been the inspiration for all your career decisions. And so, how did you manage to change an entire country's infrastructure?
You know, like I said earlier, I tried to call my wife, could not make a phone call. And I said, I'm going to fix this. Did not know how to do it. Had no idea of how India works because I had left India as a poor boy with no connections anywhere. Somebody said you must meet Mrs. Indira Gandhi, then Prime Minister, if you want to change things. I didn't know how to meet her. Finally, through somebody, I got an appointment for 10 minutes and I changed that. I said, I don't want 10 minutes. If she's sincere, she must give me 1 hour. And they were all puzzled, saying, who is this crazy guy who is expecting 1 hour with the Prime Minister? So I didn't get an appointment for 8 months. After 8 months, I got a call saying she'll give you 1 hour. So I went prepared as if I was going to talk to CEO. And basically told her that telecom and IT will change the face of India. For that, you don't need anybody's help. You can do it on your own. You need human talent. You don't need big factory because it's going to be software predominantly. But you need to train lots and lots of people. It's all about human capacity. Software guy needs paper and pencil. She didn't understand a lot of it, but she understood the enthusiasm. And then Rajiv Gandhi, her son, was getting into politics. We were just about same age. So we clicked. And she gave me support. When she died, Rajiv Gandhi became Prime Minister. And he basically gave meaning to my life. Because I was just an engineer. And his political will convinced me that I must come back. I must change my nationality back to Indian. So I gave up my US nationality and really use this opportunity to connect India. So I worked with him for almost a decade. I became head of Telecom Commission, secretary in the government. I worked on technology missions related to rural drinking water, immunization, literacy, cooking oil, milk production, and telecom. Everywhere I used IT and technology as an entry point to bring about generational change. He really supported me at the highest level. And the young Indian talent from young people like Somaya and others, from IIT and other schools, gave their life. They worked hard and they made it happen. And then we had to come up with the right policy to deregulate, privatize telecom, change labor laws, and do lots of other things where entrepreneurs in India join hands. When I came to India for telecom, we had 2 million phones for 650 million people. It used to take 10 years to get a telephone connection. Yes. In a short span of 30 years, we have 1.2 billion phones. India is a nation of connected billion. In addition, we produce $200 billion worth of software export in software services and all, every year, year after year. Through IT, India is well respected now all over the world. Indian talent runs some of the largest corporations in the world in IT and telecom, whether it is Microsoft or Google or you name it. Indian talent all over the world, whether you go to Singapore, Dubai, London, Silicon Valley, New York, run variety of industries. All of that happened during Rajiv Gandhi era. We planted seeds for the right things. People don't understand that without planting seeds, there are no fruits. They all look at fruits today. They've forgotten who planted seeds. We eradicated polio vaccine because we decided to produce polio vaccine in India. So lots of things happen.
Because this is an amazing transformation. There's no doubt that how India changed over that time in telecoms and IT was astonishing, more than generational. I mean, you know, but you also did lots of other missions. I mean, you were talking about, you know, immunization, you were talking about, I think, dairy, about water, which are quite different areas. I mean, achieving transformation in immunization alone would have been a huge achievement for somebody. Doing water alone would have been a huge achievement. How did you manage to juggle all of these different things?
Because the idea was to really bring technology to people. Common thread was use technology as an entry point to bring about generational change. So for water, geohydrological surveys, satellite imagery, excess iron removal plant, excess fluoride removal plants, you know, desalination plants. For milk, similarly, we had, you know, all kinds of technologies, interventions, including, you know, changing the breed completely with genetic manipulations. Okay, we did that. Artificial insemination in those days was practiced, okay, as part of changing our productivity. Then in immunization, make vaccine. India did not produce any vaccine in 1985. Today, we are the largest producer of vaccine in the world. We are the largest producer of milk in the world. Okay. So all of these things required, but then these things take 20 years. These things don't happen overnight. So one who plants seeds doesn't get to see the fruits, you know, and that's life. That's okay.
But yeah, I mean, you have managed to see many of the fruits, but do the people who are consuming the fruits now, are they planting the right seeds for the next generation?
I don't think so. I don't think we are planting enough seeds for the next generation. I'm concerned. I'm very concerned. World over. Okay, I think, and that's why I decided to write this book about redesign the world.
Which, I mean, I can see a copy just behind you. And it is an amazing book. And I think, you know, a global call to action. Yeah. I mean, so I'd like to come back to sort of the Indian actions in a bit, but what's your vision for what's the short summary of the book for anybody who hasn't yet read it?
I think it's very simple. You know, I realized when I was locked up in self-quarantine during Corona crisis, that the world was last designed just about the time I was born. That design was led by US, which gave birth to UN, World Bank, IMF, NATO, WTO, WHO, GDP, GNP. And that design was really based on democracy, human rights, capitalism, consumption, and military. Then the world was bipolar, Soviet Union and US, with exactly opposite to each other in terms of ideology. Democracy was dictatorship, human rights were not valuable, capitalism was, state-controlled economy, consumption was not encouraged, but both had military as their core growth engine. That design has done well for last 70 years. I think it was a gift from the US to the world to set up a rule-based system. It improved longevity, infant mortality, reduced poverty, but it has not solved many problems of the world. Poverty, hunger, violence. The biggest problem is environmental blunder, global warming, unnecessary growth in areas just for consumption. And 70 years down the road with hyperconnectivity, we have a whole new world. For the first time in the human history, we are all connected. I mean, this conversation doesn't cost us anything. It's free. Look at the power of hyperconnectivity. Okay. So hyperconnectivity is all about democratization of information, decentralization of execution, and demonetization of services. It is also about content and context. So localization has a different meaning now because of the hyperconnectivity. Hyperconnectivity is one where the distance is dead and time is instant. So how do you use this hyperconnectivity to take humanity to the next level? Unfortunately, today we use hyperconnectivity to do the same thing we have been used to doing, little better, little cheaper, little faster. But we are not using hyperconnectivity to do things we have never done before because we don't know what that is. So when I look at the design, I said, hey, lots of things happen in 70, 80 years. One, world got decolonized. When the design was conceived, there was still British Raj. In 25 years, world completely got decolonized. Then China could rise to a level no one ever thought it could. Soviet Union fell apart. Technology became pervasive. I had never seen air conditioner before coming to America. I had never seen TV. I had never made a telephone call. Can you imagine that? And this was 50 years ago, 60 years ago. Today, every kid assumes that when you are born, you get a telephone with it. My granddaughter asked me the other day, she said, Dada, she calls me Dada. She said, at what age did you get cell phone? So I said, at 54. She said, no, that can't be. But what about my dad? She said, what age did you give my dad cell phone? I said, darling, cell phone did not exist 20 years ago. And she could not comprehend that. Okay. So world has changed in many ways. Technology has been democratized, but at the same time, inequality has increased. Very few people are very rich and lots of people are very poor. 9/11 changed American mindset. And finally, COVID-19 changed everything. To me, COVID-19 says we are all interconnected, interrelated, interwoven, interdependent. Just because we look different doesn't mean we are different. Just because we follow different religion, different language, we are all human beings. So at the end of the day, only two things matter in life: planet and people. Our planet is in pain because we have misused. We have polluted our air, ruined our marine life, killed many of our animals, extinguished. We have destroyed our environment. Global warming is a real threat. We have talked for 25 years, but we haven't done anything substantial. And people, we have not built inclusive world. We still separate people based on race, religion, color, caste, background, gender problem. And we must learn that we are all part of the same ecosystem. So then I said, today there are really two designs in the world. One is American design, based on taking last design forward. When Biden says America is here again, what Biden is saying is that we want to propagate democracy, human rights, capitalism, consumption, and military. Then you have a Chinese design, which is based on Belt and Road Initiative, because China is a new power and they want to change the world. But both of these designs are based on command and control. Hyperconnectivity demand that we design world based on networking, flat organizations, based on collaboration, cooperation, co-creation. And that requires different mindset. It is not about superpower. It is about fixing our planet and helping our people. In the process, there'll be multiple superpowers, not one. The world cannot be seen in terms of superpower. It has to be seen in terms of networking of nations. So the idea is now to take democracy to inclusion, take human rights to human needs, take capitalism to new economy, take consumption to conservation and sustainability, and finally, take military to non-violence. I hope we have evolved to a point we can settle our differences across the table. And we don't need to build supersonic nuclear weapons to settle our differences. We spend $2 trillion a year on defense. We know we can eliminate hunger for 200 billion. So I think it is time to redesign the world.
So it's an incredibly powerful pitch, and there's so many things in there I'd like to dig into. I'd like to come back maybe to China. Just on that demilitarization piece, one of my favorite stories there is about Costa Rica, who, as I'm sure you know, decided
I've been there many times.
There was no point having a military, and
Exactly.
they put money into education, and they have transformed their population and their bit of the planet. It's a great example.
Absolutely. I mean, just look at India and Pakistan, how much money they spend on defense, both countries. When both countries need education, health, and prosperity for the people. But for some reason, they can't do it. It is always fight. Fight for what? I have not understood yet. Okay.
So I share the view, and there are some questions coming in, so please do continue to ask questions that you'd like to put. But you talked about the need to get away from superpowers and decentralizing, and how networking could open things up more. However, what we're seeing in some ways is a different centralization of power. We're seeing Facebook or whatever they're calling themselves today. We're seeing Google and Alphabet. We're seeing these organizations seize that control in a quite remarkable way. Are you optimistic that we will be able to re-decentralize that, if that's a phrase? Or
I am
are
very
there different superpowers?
I am very optimistic because hyperconnectivity by definition is all about empowering human beings. This is a window to the world. The business model of these companies is to optimize profit. Intention of the political leaders is to optimize power. And that's why they want to centralize. They must realize that optimization of power or profit in the long run is not going to help the society. We need to optimize planet and people. So we need to move from political power and profit to planet and people. How do we optimize what is good for the planet? What is good for people? I think that sense will come in. Right now, we are still going through this transition where the old ideas are holding them back. They get rewarded for profit. They get rewarded for political control. But I think hyperconnectivity is going to change that. It may be 20 years, it may be 25 years. To me, there is a knee-jerk reaction right now. And everybody wants to control. Democracies are not democracies anymore. A lot of democracies are being hijacked, where people control institutions, they control media. Look at what is happening with Facebook. You amplify lies because there is unauthenticated behavior. You can hide in some other name and criticize everybody. You got to be open, honest, and promote truth and not lies. I'm sure it will change. It's a matter of time.
I hope you're right. So we've had a couple of questions. One from, as it happens, my father, Herbert Huppert, who's a regular attendee at these events, who says your point about wasted money on defence is right on, but how do you go about convincing people and governments to take this line? You know, can you develop your comments now about how people need to change, but how do we make it happen?
I think we need people like you, Julian, to help us. It is not something I can do. I'm not qualified to do everything, nor do I know all the answers, believe me, and I'm sincere about it. All I can do is start a new conversation. Where Sumayyas of the world, young people, will have to carry this forward. What we need is a new conversation. If we can start a new conversation in Cambridge, Oxford, MIT, Harvard, Delhi University, other places, saying, look, this world, the way we have designed doesn't work anymore. We have enough technology. We can produce anything today. The question is, what is that we want to produce? We wind up producing only for the people who can afford to buy and not for the people who need it. One of my favorite sentences that I've been saying for the last 35 years is that best brains in the world are busy solving problems of the rich, who really don't have problems to solve. And as a result, problems of the poor don't get the right talent. It is time for us to solve problems of the people at the bottom of the economic pyramid. It is in our interest. It is in global interest to eliminate poverty. It is in global interest to eliminate hunger, because that will reduce violence, that will reduce lots of things, okay? And we need to really go beyond self to society. Today's model needs to be turned upside down. Today's model is top-down development. We need bottom-up development. Today's model is big companies to scale. We want networking of small companies to scale. So everything we do today, look at education. I mean, education is the biggest factory in the world. I've been saying that if Henry Ford landed up today back on this world, the only place he will find manufacturing process going is education. It's like a factory, 400 kids come to class, grind, get a degree. We need to change all that. We need to change our health system. We need to change government structures. All governments are in vertical silos. When hyperconnectivity requires networking. So everything we do today is basically obsolete. We got to start from that. Saying, how do I redesign everything? I need to redesign economy, education, health, governance, family structure has fallen apart. Communities have fallen apart. Okay. And that's the challenge for all of us.
So I think you identify the challenge extremely well. And you've done enough that I'm sure you do have great ideas. So can I put a question For Will Davison, can I also just say there's been a couple of comments in Hindi, and I am extremely limited in my language skills, and I'm afraid I won't be able to put comments or questions in Hindi, and that's my fault for not speaking enough languages. But
no problem. But then somebody could ask in Tamil, somebody could ask in Gujarati. So
yeah, so I'm afraid I'm very limited most of English. But can I ask Will Davison's question, which is, what can we do about these profit-driven corporations? I mean, you've worked in them, you know lots of CEOs, you know the structures. Is there any way to change them from the inside, or do we have to create new ones from the ground up? And what would these new corporations look like?
I think we need corporations to begin to think in terms of trust. Corporations cannot be just for profit for shareholders. Corporations also need to exist so that the profit can be equally shared by community, employees, society. Optimizing profit for an individual has limitations. See, general formula is I become a billionaire and then I hand out money as a donation. That model is not workable, because then they are in the business of giving money. They are not giving money. They are in the business of giving money. They dictate where it should be used. The key is for communities to decide their destiny. What works in Cambridge doesn't work in some city in US or in India or in China. Local communities must decide based on local genetic pool. Look at the soil. Every country has their own microbes, their own soil. If we take global fertilizer and equalize everybody's soil, it's a destruction. That's what we have done. So we need to respect globalization and at the same time promote localization. We need to worry about local language, local wisdom, local water, local forest, local species. Okay? And I think with hyperconnectivity, localization can be given more importance.
So, I mean, you put out a challenge for us to try to do something about it as Cambridge, as other places. And as it happens, I spent the rest of this week running an event on universal ownership for large pension funds to try to get big global pension funds to see that actually their success doesn't depend on picking the right stocks today, but it depends on society doing well. And if they want to pay a pension in 40 years' time, if we have a global biodiversity crisis, that destroys their ability. And so, as you say, to try to get them to think about societal benefits.
I would say you should insist that they focus on two things: planet and people.
Yeah.
Is it good for planet? Is it good for people? Not one group of people. People in general. Include women, include minorities, include poor. Every corporation must ask that question if you want moral standing. What I do, does it affect our planet in a good way or bad way? Does it affect people in a good way or bad way? If I am promoting rumors which divide people, create controversies, that's something I shouldn't do, even if it means profit to me. If you just focus on these two, I think things will begin to change.
Yeah, I mean, I hope you're right, but it's obviously quite a challenging time.
Of course.
And because one of the joys of this interconnectivity is that we can communicate much faster, but one of the downsides is that it means that negative things can also get around faster. It is very hard to have the right things.
Yeah, but I'm also, Julian, I'm also saying that at the end of the day, I have trust in people. People want to do good. People want to feel good. There may be 10% people who want to damage, but I think 90% of the people mean well. They don't want to hurt anybody. They say, let me live with peace, and I'll let you live with peace. It is that 10% that complicates life.
So just this leads me on to a question actually that Samia wanted to ask. So Samia, do you want to ask it yourself rather than, you know, just having me sort of?
Sure. Just hearing this conversation kind of made me think about this a little bit. Recently, we've had a conversation in India about how Facebook platforms have been used for rumor mongering, hate speech, and all sorts of things. It has become one of the platforms through which young students have even been arrested for posting about, you know, their political opinions. So I was wondering what you really think of technology in terms of like, where do we draw the right line of, you know, ethical sharing, and where does it really become a platform for spreading rumors and hate speech, and how do we, in a world like ours, regulate something of that sort, because it's a fine balance between freedom of expression and hate speech. So is there actually a legal point to all of this, or do we have another solution, or how does it, I mean, there are ill effects of technology, and in your mind, how much of it actually contributes to global threats to democratic regimes?
See, basically, there are two issues here. One is the business model that we use for social media is designed to optimize profit. And it allows clicks to increase and unauthenticated behavior to amplify. So, for example, there are 8 Facebook pages on Sam Pitroda, let's say. I don't know who the hell is right Sam Pitroda. People, you know, tweet on my behalf. I don't know. And my wife will say, did you do this? I said, I don't know. And then she would say, oh, did you know that there are people, you know, saying, oh, you did this? I said, I have no idea. I don't pay attention to it. So if I do something, there are a whole bunch of people who don't exist start responding. So it is an unauthenticated behavior. If I had an option, I would say, let's design internet for a true internet and fake internet. Today, fake internet, where people are hiding behind curtain, promote all these lies. If I identify myself as Sam Pitroda, whatever I say on this internet, I'm responsible for it. So the second part is really rights of a digital citizen. We are all digital citizens. We have human rights. We have not defined the rights of a digital citizen yet. I have just set up a group along with my friends. We have set up a group, I should say, where we want to define the rights of the digital citizen. Because digital citizen imply you work at Oxford, live in Delhi, and may get paid by Harvard in America. And you might decide to buy something from Brazil, deliver to India, but pay it in euro. What does it mean? What does it mean to residency, citizenship, tax? We haven't thought through any of these things. So it is an evolving process. The next big thing is to define the rights of a digital citizen. I have responsibility as a digital citizen. I can't just go on attacking Julian just because of something irresponsibly. Okay. I must respect the right I am given on digital media. Like I have human rights. I can't go kill somebody. Human rights are defined. Digital rights are not defined yet. So I think we are in the very early stages of all of this. We want instant fixes, but in human history, this period of 30, 40, 50 years will be seen as a time to plant seeds for the next human civilization.
Okay. This is a fascinating thread about digital citizens and rights. And you know, there's been a few people doing bits. I think I did some work on digital rights online in the UK, and if any of that is useful. Because it strikes me that one of the problems at the moment is we're applying outdated rules and then just creating the opportunity for arbitrage, where what happens is that people buy things in the country that will charge them the least tax, rather than that reflects reality. So, I mean, good luck to coming up with some rules that will work. I think
maybe you should join our group. I will write to you. You should join our group. We have just started the group.
It'd be an honor if I have anything to contribute. But so we've had another question that's come in, to come back to India. So India had this huge growth, this huge transformation. And perhaps if I can fit in with the question we've had online with another one that I've been thinking about, because you also mentioned China, and India grew much faster than China economically. That's not true anymore. What's the future for India's technology sector? How will India's future growth work?
See, first of all, we must understand that there are many dimensions to growth. Growth is not about economic growth. Growth is about cultural growth. Growth is about intellectual growth, spiritual growth, environmental growth. Okay. Unfortunately, we judge growth only in terms of GDP and nothing else. You see these skyscrapers and you get impressed, which is fine. I respect that. Okay. But there is price to be paid. So many times you have this debate: do you want dictatorship and have Chinese kind of growth, or you want democracy and Indian kind of growth? I believe human empowerment is very important. I believe human freedom is very important. The fact that in India I can go settle anywhere I want has certain value. So first you have to decide what kind of an environment you want to live in. You know, when I go to England, I feel at home. You know, nobody stops me from doing this or doing that. Same in America. So I am one of those who firmly believe in individual freedom. Now, some people say, I don't want individual freedom. I can't argue. Okay. So the growth that you see in China is good. I respect that. They've done well. The question is, what about the growth of the human being? Are they happy? If they're happy and they only want money, more power to them. I think Indian growth is going to come. It's a different kind of a growth. Indian families, Indian value system, all is very different. Indian lifestyle, because India is a very diverse country. People in North look very different from South. People in the East are very different from people in West. There are 15 languages. China, that way, is homogeneous, comparatively. Okay. So India has to work on democracy, decentralization, because it is one of the most diverse countries in the world. And diversity brings certain challenges. When you have 15 languages, I mean, I have Indian friends who speak 5 Indian languages. I speak 5 Indian languages. The only language we speak in is English. Okay, which is okay. You see? So it depends.
You're still an optimist about democracy then? You think democracy
Absolutely
can survive technology change? It can survive...
No, because technology is all about democracy. It is decentralizing. It is empowering individual. It is allowing you to make choices. So hyperconnectivity is all about extending democracy.
I hope that you're right. Two more threads then, and I think because this, I think maybe
Somaya can read the Hindi questions. Okay.
If Samia has other things to put in, that would be great. Again,
go ahead.
Two things that I would quite like to explore, and then we should let you go because I think this is your...
No problem. I'm enjoying it.
You talked about COVID as being a step change, that people realize that we're all interconnected. I would love that to be true. But rather than seeing a consequence of COVID being people realizing that inequality around the world matters, that international aid matters, that we need to transform all of life to help ourselves, What we've seen in the UK and in various other places is reductions that internationalism. We've seen a growth in nationalism rather than globalism. I love the optimism that COVID could flip us into a better state. But isn't there a risk that it takes us away from it?
No, I think we are looking localization and globalization only in context of economy. Localization and globalization cannot be seen in context of trade and economy. Unfortunately, we think if you are local, you are not global. Not true. You could be local and you could be global. There are certain things to be globalized and there are certain things to be localized. Let me give you an example. The tomato that I eat in my house, on an average, it travels 1,400 miles before it comes to my table in America. Now, is that necessary? I don't think so. I should be growing tomato in my backyard or eating local tomato. That is localization. Just because tomato is 2 cents cheaper, they bring it from 1,400 miles. In the process, they create a lot of pollution because of the truck. But then the argument is they are also providing job to truck driver. Okay, so you got to look at this entire chain very differently. It is good to localize local food, local custom, but it is also good to have option to eat Chinese food and Japanese food and all that also. Okay. So let's not confuse the fact that it is this or that. It is the shade of gray that make things happen. It is not about democracy, dictatorship, capitalism, state control economy, okay, localization, globalization. No, it's about all of it. So don't use old labels that we have been using for 70 years. Those labels in a hyper-connected world do not make sense.
And I think what you say is particularly true with digital goods, that whereas moving a tomato thousands of miles requires a truck driver, it requires a lot of effort, we are however many miles apart we are. Samir is a whole lot further in a different direction. It makes almost no difference.
Absolutely.
Do you think we'll just see more and more digital goods that can be replicated close to free, that can be shared close to free, that can be transmitted close to free?
Yes. Yes. Okay. Agree.
But do you think that will then, because I think one of the things that I find interesting is that if I have a car and somebody else would like to have a car, there is a very large real cost to that. Whereas if I have a piece of software or some data, there's an almost zero cost to sharing that with somebody else. Could we see a rethinking of how the economy works, where we do much more very low cost or zero cost sharing of software, of data, of facilities?
I think this really relates to what does it mean to have a job? Okay. So let me take 2 examples. When self-driven car becomes a reality, maybe in 5 years, maybe in 10 years. First of all, I will not own a car because I can order a car anytime I want, whatever car I want, wherever I want to go, it'll take me. So I'll say I want Mercedes to take me to this place, and it'll be on my door. I'll get in, I'll do my work, it'll take me wherever. So I won't need parking space, garage, driver's license, insurance, all of that is gone. But the most interesting thing is, today we produce 50 million cars a year. 90% of the time car is parked. So tomorrow I'll produce only 5 million cars and not 50 million. I won't need that much steel. I won't have that many jobs. All the car factories will close. So who's going to work for you? Where will you get a job? Robot will pay tax for you. Okay. And you and I will have more free time. The idea of 40 hours a week job with pension, guaranteed work, all that is gone. It will be a job based on assignment, 3 months here, 4 weeks there, 5 weeks there, and it will be a multidisciplinary job. You could be a professor, you could be a research scientist, you could be a gardener, you could be a painter, okay? And you and I will have more free time. Things are going to get so cheap, like telecom. Telecom is today almost free. I guarantee in 25 years, energy will be free. Transportation will be free in next 10 years. Because all these machines will be running all over. You can take whatever you want to take and go wherever you want to go. It will be part of your tax. Okay. So now we will have free time to explore knowledge, relationships, culture, food. That is the meaning of information society, knowledge society.
I mean, it's a brilliant vision. I hope
has to happen. We have to make it happen.
I look forward to seeing it happen with you. And certainly we've seen changes historically. I mean, I don't know the story in India in detail, but the Romans worked 9 days out of 10. We moved to 6 out of 7. We now think 5 out of 7 is the right amount. Lots of places are exploring
3 days out of week. You need to work 3 days.
So there are questions about how you make it all work, because what we've seen during COVID is some people transitioning to working from home, maybe working fewer hours, not having to commute, but other people whose jobs still require many physical hours of extra work.
Always true.
How do we make sure that we get the good version of your vision rather than more unequal version? Because I can imagine a world where a few people are working only a few hours a week and others are working to support that.
See, right now, very few people are working long hours, and there are lots of people who have nothing to do. All information people are working too long because there isn't enough talent pool available. Okay. Tomorrow, people like you and me would be working from home, but the gardener will have to go out and garden until a robot comes in who will help you gardening. Until robot comes in who goes picks up grapes. Okay. So all of the manual jobs, routine jobs are going to be mechanized. Today, we can grow more food per acre than you could ever imagine. There is an experiment going on in California, which was written up in Wall Street Journal, which said per acre production of food can be 150 times, not 150%. 150 times. If that happens, in every city, there'll be few acres which will be producing food for that city. Okay. So the world is going to completely change in next 50 years. But we can't imagine that. Vertical farming is almost here, if you want. Okay. You don't need soil to farm. Okay. You don't need cattle to farm. Okay. So lots of these things are changing. Average young person today, like Somayyas of the world, will live to be 150 years, 120 years. Okay. What does it mean to a 150-year lifespan? So all of these questions are very important, and we need longer conversation on these things,
So I think we could have, and I hope we will have longer conversations, but I think that probably brings us towards an end for this particular conversation. But Sam, it's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us. And I hope to see you in Cambridge, because
I would love to remain connected with you. Thank you.
There are certainly things which we can't do remotely. And we can't, for example, offer you a nice meal, whether it's locally grown or not, from here. But thank you very much. And if you've enjoyed this, please do look out for some of the other events that we're running at the Intellectual Forum, some of which would fit very well with this. We're talking about space this month. We have a whole series of events about space, and indeed, very appropriately, our next event on Tuesday is asking whether military activities should be off limits in outer space. Maybe we can't get rid of military on this planet, but can we at least start off by not having it outside? We then have other events. We have Sam Gilbert talking about good data, the case for technology data on the 19th. We also have, just relevant to what you were just saying, the founder of Modern Meadow, a company that is growing artificial leather and artificial beef from stem cells, so we can get rid of using cows.
Absolutely, it's all happening. But you know, before we go into micro issues, we need to really look at macro issues. And that's what I tried to do in this book. I said there are macro issues of global design that we need to change before we go into micro issues. It is good for some people to be in micro issues, okay? But macro issues are very important.
Absolutely. Thank you very, very much for everything you've done over so many decades, but particularly for the last hour and a quarter. Thank you very much. It's been an honor and a pleasure to have you with us.
Really appreciate it, but let's be in touch.